Hi, agency consultant Karl Sakas here. Welcome to Agency Office Hours for January 2021. Every second Tuesday, we answer your questions about the business side of running your agency to help you grow more profitably. We'll be answering 4 questions today about a range of agency problems, and the agency owners and leaders are joining us live to ask their questions. All right, well, here's a preview of what is to come. From Raleigh, North Carolina, here's a preview of the topics. First, CJ has a question about what to do when an agency owner's time is maxed out. Bet has a question about levering up to higher paying clients. But how do you do that if you've primarily grown via referral before? Michelle has a question about client exclusivity, in fact, a currently unfolding situation. Looking forward to helping there. And finally, Brad has a question related to a mix of sales and team structure. How big should your agency's sales team be? And maybe regardless of size, what roles should people have on the sales team? So we'll be talking about time management, about difficult clients, about business development, and so on. If we don't get to your question today, if you weren't one of the people that we prearranged, feel free to sign up for future office hours, submit your question when you RSVP. As usual, we are recording office hours today, so don't say anything out loud that you don't want to become public. And if you're watching live, you'll get a copy of the recording within 24 hours. If you don't follow Sakas and Company on YouTube currently, and Kat, if you could pull the YouTube link off the website footer, I would encourage you to subscribe. You'll get instant notifications as soon as the video goes live. Again, please introduce yourself in chat. Where are you from? What are you looking forward to in the coming month? All right, well, first up is CJ. So CJ, you can go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself. I see you're good to go there. All right, well, so CJ, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me, Karl. I'm excited.
Awesome. To paraphrase, CJ, you asked about time management, among other things. When you feel like your time is just about maxed out, what should you do as an agency owner? Could you share a bit more about what you're running into, and then we can find solutions?
Sure. My agency is 13 months old. It is called The Gist. We're an inbound marketing agency based out of Buffalo, New York. And up until last week, it was just me. I've actually just brought on Kelly Curl as a project manager, and Kelly is on this call.
Hi, Kelly. Welcome.
Super excited about that. I love that, like, people always, like, when you start a business, like, a lot of people will, maybe they're just being polite. They're just trying to compliment you as a successful business owner, blah, blah, blah. And I've found myself having to correct them because the truth is there is nothing about my history that suggests I am or will be a successful business owner. I am a good marketing strategist. Now, I believe I'm working in that direction. I'm just trying to be humble about it, right?
Sure.
Like, the reason why I'm in this position right now is because I'm a good marketing strategist and I have enough business sense to kind of put this together, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that I'm inherently expert at managing my time, managing profitability, and all of these things. So what brought me to here is that I'm a good strategist, and I brought on some clients, some of which are people I had already known, and some of which just through networking and just staying active with my own marketing, producing content, sharing it on social, whatever.
Yes.
What it's come down to is that although I work with a lot of independent contractors, writers, designers, developers, and things like that,
Right.
Organization and project management has never been super intuitive to me. And I'm at a point now where I don't want to feel trapped by my business because I started my business for the opposite reason, to have more freedom. And while I understand that there are some short-term sacrifices I need to make along the way to build the type of structure that will allow for that freedom, right now it's really challenging. And I'm just at the point now where I'm kind of maxed out on my time. I've brought in Kelly to help manage projects. We're onboarding a new project management system. But it's not only that I need to take things off my plate, I'm also seeing the opportunity to create a larger organizational structure and project managing hierarchy in my business But at every turn, while I think something feels like a good idea, I'm always second guessing myself. I'm like, am I doing this the right way? Is this really where I should be starting? So I'd be very curious to know. I got the sense on your website that you work with a lot of people or have worked with a lot of people
Mhm.
that are or have been in my situation. So I was
Yes.
really itching to hear what you might say to somebody who's like, okay, there are no more hours in the day. You need to
Right.
sleep. You need to spend time with your family. Like these things can't go away. So
Mhm.
growing your business can't come at the expense of that. So,
Yes.
so what do you do?
Well, first, thank you for sharing that. That helps add some context. And by the way, for anyone who is listening on chat who has moved beyond the 13-month point in running your agency, if you have any support or comments or suggestions, feel free to share that on chat to help CJ. So, thinking about the pieces there, CJ, there are a few aspects to this. I have my day-to-day involvement meter, which is a way to think about ultimately where your time is going. And I'm sharing the sort of slide version of that here. And I realize depending on for people who are watching, depending on the kind of the layout in Zoom, you may not see sort of the full thing, but imagine initially, and CJ, it sounds like you're there now or you're shifting, you're in mandatory, right? You're doing everything. You can get to necessary where you're getting more help from your team, including getting Kelly's help. That'll be important. You can move to needed, making yourself needed, not necessary. And then eventually you can potentially, if you want, make yourself optional. And in chat, Pat has shared the link to my article on this behind this model. But one of the ways to get there is getting clear on swim lanes, who's in charge of what. Also, values, goals, and resources. Like, what are the values and the goals and the resources to observe so that you don't have to do everything? And these 6 agency roles help as well. But I guess maybe the question would be, and we've shared article links to these articles, so you don't have to. If people want to get screenshots, you're welcome to. But with that in mind, CJ, where do you want to go? What is your long-term goal for the business? Because that'll help figure out where to
Yeah.
focus next.
So I think for the first time in a while over the last couple of weeks and months, I've really developed a good answer for this,
Mm,
but I'm sure it could be improved. So I want to generate a multi-million dollar business.
got it.
But size is not my goal. But I
Mm,
would like to at least be in the couple of $1 million. I want to be big enough where it's profitable. I could bring on a small team and
mm,
compensate everybody well with benefits. That's very important to me.
yeah,
I want to be able to offer benefits and all of that to everybody who works with me. And I want for us to be small enough where I don't feel like the business has outgrown a sense of community, familiarity, like that camaraderie, but large enough
mm,
where we're making a lot of money and we could take on a new project if we want. Whether it
mm,
be a big client or a fun side project. I want to be able to
right,
take on big client projects. I want, if we have an idea of like, hey, let's take everything we know and turn it into an online course. Like I want to be able
right.
to be big enough where we have enough resources and bandwidth to do all of those things. And then
Mm,
personally, what
yeah,
my role is, I want to eventually be the director of marketing for my agency. I don't
got
want
it.
to be the person. If I could, like I would hire somebody to be the CEO someday.
Mm,
I love where I naturally gravitate to is, managing content, creating videos, speaking, writing blog posts, managing the website,
right.
configuring things within our CRM. Like that's really what excites me the most. So my
Yeah.
dream job is to be a is to market my own business and get there eventually.
Got it. Makes sense. So, you might opt to eventually give yourself a CMO title or something like that, kind of depending on what makes sense. As a potential direction, you might want to consider if you have, say, 10 people and you are averaging $200,000 in revenue per full-time equivalent each year, which you could as a specialist agency, and certainly you can make that even higher. That would give you a team of 10 people, so everyone would know each other, for better or for worse, hopefully for better, not for worse. At the $2 million mark, you have enough money running through the business to get additional help. So perhaps you have a team member who's handling some of the team oversight. Maybe not every single person is reporting to you. If your goal is to eliminate all management, probably you're going to need to be bigger than 10, but it's something to head toward. So that may give you kind of a place to, directionally to head toward. Perfect. There we go. So thinking
For
about email.
somebody, whoever put that in the chat, I bought this last week, so I'm going to read it soon.
Nice. And I have a further article on that about eMyth, applying technician, manager, entrepreneur in an agency setting. So I think you're on the right track. Like by hiring Kelly, hi Kelly, that's going to get some of the project management off your plate that you don't love doing, because someone's got to do it. So I think you're on the right track. Let's check in a year and see how things are going.
Great. Thank you.
Cool. Well, CJ, thank you for joining. Next up, we have a question from Bet in Oregon. Bet, it looks like you are on video and you're unmuted. So Bet, welcome.
Thanks for taking my question.
Absolutely. Well, for everyone who is listening, here's the question. To paraphrase, Bet, you asked, what's your advice to lever up to higher paying clients, especially if we've relied on referrals before? Could you elaborate a bit more about what you're running into?
Sure. So I started out freelancing part-time in 2008. And CJ talked about just being starting out, but I've been actually working for a very long time and very slowly grown. And a part of it is not, just not being super aggressive and really liking some of the client work. But now, we're an agency with 3 of us full-time and 2 part-time and some other people around the edges. We don't really have the revenue near where we need to be. And we've been trying over especially the last couple of years to lever up to higher paying clients. I came out of the nonprofit world, and that's where most of my contacts were initially. And, and not the high end of the nonprofit world. Right? And
yes.
So we've been trying to lever that up, and we have been gradually doing that. But and I truly believe that our team, with our skills and our experience now, is really worth paying a lot more than we were 5 or 10 years ago. But the problem has been that we've mostly relied on word of mouth and referrals. And the folks that are our existing clients tend to refer people that are about at the same price point.
Right.
So that cobbler's children have no shoes kind of thing. We haven't marketed very well, but we're trying to figure out, as we are looking at niching down a little bit more around web accessibility and ADA compliance in what we do, and how do we connect with those folks when we've mostly relied on that word of mouth and referrals.
You're not alone in primarily having relied on referrals. It's a common challenge. And in fact, I have an article, and Kat has shared it, around how do you grow when you've relied on referrals, and either it's slowed down, or maybe it hasn't slowed down, but it's hard to predict when you're going to get the referrals, right? It's not a press a button kind of thing. Right. So we have some articles on that. I think one of the big things to consider is, how do you get in front of the decision makers who have more money than the current smaller budget clients? Right. You'd mentioned your past experience with nonprofits. I worked in an agency that specialized in nonprofits and mission-based organizations. So not everyone was nonprofit, but sort of a mission focus. And, the nonprofits we worked with were larger nonprofits. They were spending minimum of $75,000 for a website. Some were 120, 150. The largest project I managed was $300,000 plus. So these were sizable mission-based organizations. One was a, sort of a health services organization. Their annual budget was $60 million. I mean, that's a bigger budget, annual revenue than most of the agencies I work with. So,
But the nonprofits we've been working at have been stretching to pay $5,000 to $7,000 for a website. So
the question is where to find them. So for instance, one of my clients focuses on a particular niche, and there are at least 2 major trade associations within that niche. At one, the members tend to be really small. At the other, it's a range. Some are small, but some are quite large. And one of the ways we identified how do you find the ones, prospective clients who have larger budgets, one way is to look at it as who has made large capital investments. Mm-hmm. If you have a facility that cost you $1 million or several $1 million, the client persuaded a bank to lend them money to buy this large mm-hmm. facility. So if they've got that, they're trying to maximize the utilization of that. So one way to look at it would be, what are the proxies? What are the tells that they might have more budget? One on the nonprofit side that we did, and of course now it's how do we find it for you on the commercial side, we would look up the Form 990. So I know at least a few people on the call work with nonprofits. If you work with US-based nonprofits, they file a Form 990. That is effectively the annual tax return for the nonprofit, and those are publicly available. GuideStar.org has them, some other sites do. And what we found is that if we would look up their tax return, if someone reached out to us, if their executive director had at least a 6-figure salary, we were pretty confident that they would spend at least $100,000 for a website. Now, obviously, that's a bit harder in sort of random for-profit businesses, because unless they're publicly traded, you don't know what people are getting paid or what have you. Though if they are publicly traded, you can look up, if they're in the US, their Form 10K, which is sort of the text version of their annual report, and see, like, what are they spending on marketing and related services. If they're privately held, again, you don't know because that's not public. If you're looking at organizations outside the US and they're publicly traded, there's going to be some sort of tax return somewhere that you could probably find. But if we think about, Beth, have you noticed any themes among the clients you've worked with that indicates that they may be not just have a need to spend more money, but want to spend more money? Have you noticed any kind of a pattern?
Some of the people that we've worked with that have been willing to spend more have been not necessarily people who were not competent or able to do the work. They could have figured this out, but they don't have the time or inclination to do it. They want it done for them. And where I think before we were mostly working with those folks that mostly wanted the DIY, but they couldn't figure out a few things. And
right.
So it's also getting into more complex development where people can't do they would not be competent. So it's kind of that stair step of the DIYers who need a little help and they've been willing to pay, but then the people who just don't have time and need to focus on other things, and then folks who really need us for our technical expertise.
In that case, you might be able to find client team size as a proxy for whether they want all of the help or not. For instance, I was talking with an agency that works with a range of startups to really large companies, and they found that their ideal client is somewhere in the middle. Now, of course, medium-sized is relative, right? For every business, medium is indeed, kind of a relative situation. But what they found was that for their version of medium, and I'm bringing up on screen my Think, Teach, Do model about agency services. So, Beth, the idea here would be, well, if we think about Think, Teach, Do, Think is about strategy. Clients like, I don't know what to do, tell me what to do. Teach is about training and empowerment. They're like, I want to do it myself, show me how. And then Do is about implementation. Either they don't have the capacity in-house, or maybe they have people, they're just too busy. It's like, just do it for me. The downside to implementation is that it's not necessarily high margin. The upside, though, is that it's easy to sell, because if people come to you saying, we need a website, or we need a blog post every week, or whatever, you need to decide if you want to work with them or not. But if that is a suitable choice, it's sort of an easy sale versus we need a business transformation strategy, and kind of there may be a question of where you even start. So if you think about it in terms of Think, Teach, Do, you can be more strategic about the services. Ideally, you lead with Think, right? A client has to do some sort of a strategy engagement, whether it's paid discovery or another strategy project. But you know what, if they're ready to work with you and it seems like a fit and you want to start with implementation, go for it. It is difficult to go, though, from do to think later, because the client sees you as the implementer rather than, the sort of strategy expert. So something to consider on that. From a marketing standpoint, I know you mentioned running into the Cobbler's Choose Challenge. What are some of the types of things you do marketing-wise from a self-marketing perspective that you do today?
Yeah, so well, before the pandemic, I used to do a lot of networking events around town, and tried to be more strategic about which ones of those I went to.
Yes.
And then and I would speak at WordCamps. We do WordPress development. Speak at WordCamps, and our team members are speaking out at WordCamps. Our content managers just gave a presentation last night that was very well attended. So some of those kinds of things. I have tried a couple different efforts with sales that didn't really go anywhere. I kind of had a part-time salesperson that was doing some cold email outreach, and a lead gen service that was kind of doing that too. And that just, A, didn't work, but B, also just kind of felt spammy and inauthentic after a bit. And but I get like, I must get half a dozen a week offers with lead gen stuff for agencies. And I haven't done that. We're putting out blog posts, and we're putting out that kind of stuff. I've been thinking about trying to do, as we're trying to focus more on accessibility, trying to do even some paid search around trying to sell an audit, which would be an entry level piece. But I don't know much about that. I would have to, but that, and I'm not sure whether that's really a good investment. But
I think it's one of those, it's worth a try, but you need to have a clear offer, right? If we think about direct mail in general, you've got the offer, you've got the creative, and you've got the list. So, for PPC, the list is, who are you targeting? So kind of, who are you going after? The offer is, what is it that, why should people actually take action? What's the benefit to them? Which in this case, it might be the audit, though you also might want to consider, and this could be true as a lead magnet in general, so whether it's part of a PPC campaign or not, around, what is a do-it-yourself audit? Some of that depends on how complex is it. Can they do it themselves? No? Okay. So then it sounds like it.
There are some pieces that they could do, some automated things, but they don't catch. That's the real sell, is that those automated tools catch a little, but not everything. And so you want to
question with the audit is and this is, as everyone's listening, you're like, how do we get people into our funnel? But one thing to consider is there, if not an automated version, is there a, brief version, 5 points that you can do for free, and then they get a taste of what it's like to work with you, and then there's a paid upgrade option to do the 20 point or 50 point or something. You're smiling.
Yeah, actually we had, part of what we do is we're making the website work for screen readers, for the visually impaired.
Yes.
And just last week, we sent our senior developer to do a training with like if somebody went blind, the training that they would take to learn to use a screen reader. She was so jazzed about that. I said, oh, maybe we should offer to do like a little 2 or 3 minute free video of what it's like to go to your website with a screen reader and how awesome that experience is.
Yeah.
And so we've been thinking about that as a way to, but there's a kind of limit on how much we could really have her do that, right? We would have to make it she can't sit there and do that all day. That would be
right. Well, and I think a way to approach that might be through time blocking, right? Maybe the idea is to do 3 of those a week, 3 of the reviews, and they all happen on, Monday afternoon or something. Like that obviously isn't an immediate turnaround from a sales perspective, but that also avoids impacting the billable time. So, it sounds like one of the big things is, how do you get people in the door, and then how do you create opportunities to upsell them more from that? The different topics you mentioned make sense. I think that the sooner and the clearer you get on where you're targeting, if it, for instance, it's about accessibility, that is a horizontal specialization, right? You could work with people in any industry rather than only accessibility for a particular industry. I think the clearer you get about that and the more you broadcast that, the easier things will get, because people get to your website and they'll feel like they're at home. For instance, I do that in my pre-intake survey, where, I only work with agencies. I run my CMO mastermind group, but that's through my volunteering. All of my paid services are 100% agencies. So even to the point I occasionally hear from non-agencies and like, can you help? It's like, well, I could, but I choose to only work with agencies, kind of thing. And so, in the survey, I have all kinds of agency related language, right? I thinking about it's agency coaching and consulting, not consulting for anyone. Thanks for reaching out. Agency growth is good. Agency owners, some agency examples. All of the articles help reinforce agencies. Even in the questions, I don't ask, what's your company name? I ask, what is your agency name? Like, the goal is ultimately, if someone arrives here and they're a match for help, I make it clear that this is all agencies all the time. And, I understand what you're dealing with. So I think the clearer you get on the accessibility side of things, the easier I think, it'll likely become. What are your thoughts on next steps from what we've covered?
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about the free offer of the little video of that might be a really great offer for getting people into the funnel. That would be for sure. And I'm starting the boot camp tomorrow, so I'm kind of hoping that a lot of this will become more clear as I'm trying to kind of sort out just where to put the energy and the effort and the resources. It just feels like there's a lot of great things that I could do, but
yes,
I need to get some clarity about what the priorities are.
Well, actually, in the boot camp, we'll talk about that in week 4, around 5 strategies for growth and 25 sub-strategies. You'll pick 2, a primary and a secondary. There are actually 600 different permutations for how you could arrange that, but we'll talk about that. So if you're in the boot camp, that's coming up. If you're not, I'm sorry you missed the deadline for it. It sold out last month. So such as it is. Well, Beth, thank you. I appreciate your asking the question.
Cool. Thank you. It's great. Great advice.
Awesome. Coming up next, we have, let's see, looking here, coming up next, we'll take a look at a difficult client situation that is currently unfolding. What do you do when one of your current clients is demanding that you not work with a prospective client and they aren't even direct competitors? We'll take a look at that. And then we'll take a look at structuring, going back to business development, structuring your sales team, how to get that right. But first, a word from our sponsor, me. Today's agency office hours is sponsored by Sakas & Company, helping agencies grow profitably. If you've considered my one-on-one executive coaching program, now might be the right time to dig in. Clients report results like growing their revenue, increasing their income, and decreasing their hours, and sometimes doing all of that at once. I limit my active client count, which means there aren't a lot of spots for doing executive coaching, but you're in luck. If you're watching live or watching the recording soon after it comes out, I do have spots for new clients after 2 clients graduated. So got some new spots. How long does coaching take? Well, officially it's month to month, so you can stop anytime you want. I will say big results take 12 to 18 months. If it were easy, you probably would have fixed it already. But I've designed the process specifically for agency leaders like you, including finding quick wins. As one agency owner said, he made more progress in the first month of coaching than in a decade on his own. Not bad. Are you a match? Well, I'd have to review your situation. If you complete the survey, the one that I screen shared that wasn't part of the original plan, but shared. It's a short, no obligation application. Most people complete it in under 15 minutes, and I'll follow up to recommend next steps. If you're a match, recommend a free exploratory call. And if you're not a match, I will let you know either way and, recommend what next. So, I love working with agency owners and leaders. And if you'd like to work with me one-on-one, I would love to hear from you. Thanks. Well, on to our next question, which is from Michelle in Michigan. Michelle, are you ready to join?
I am ready. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Let me go ahead and add the pin here. All right. Excellent. Well, to paraphrase, Michelle, you had asked, and then we'll dig a bit deeper on this. Question is, a current client is unhappy that we're considering working with a prospect in their industry, but they're not even direct competitors. How should we approach client exclusivity? Definitely a frustrating situation. Could you elaborate a bit more, Michelle?
Yes. So I have a client that has been with us for quite a while. They're a really good client. They're our largest client. And so it's a specific industry that's very niche, and that's an area that we focus in on that.
Got it.
And so we had went to a virtual trade show. We made a connection. They've been watching us because they know the client that we're working with, and they like the marketing, and they're like very complimentary, and I've been trying, I want to work with you, blah, 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 let's meet. So we did, and everything's going great. They're very, they fit, like with the same, I guess they're our same style and culture. So it's really cool. So we're excited, and then that client asked if they could reach out to our one client that's our very large client. And so
you've got company A is the current client, large client, similar industry, but not exactly doing the same thing. And then prospect is company B that you met at the event. And so prospect company B wants to talk to company A, I guess about what is their experience working with you kind of thing?
Yeah, just as a referral or recommendation,
kind of a reference check call kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah. So when we, out of respect, we wanted to reach out to our current client, say, is that all right? Can they reach out to you?
Yeah.
And that's when kind of all the red flags started happening. So they are a manufacturer for a racking system to grow certain products, and the other company does lighting. And so like a grower would want the racking system, but they'd also want the lighting system.
It's like you would need both. You couldn't buy just one or the other. They're complementary. You need both. Okay.
Correct. And if my client was bothered by another racking company, I could get it because that would be a direct competitor.
Yeah.
But now they're coming and saying, no, I don't want you working with, HVAC or, lighting and this and this and this. And they have this, all of these different, I guess, funnels of that. And we're like, what? They're not even a direct competitor, and they just aren't getting it. And they keep saying, well, they're too close. It's too close because what if we buy a lighting company down the road? And so I said, well, are you going to? Is that something that we don't know about? And well, I don't know, but, and I said, well, it'd be helpful if we had your strategic plan so that looking forward, we would know this information.
What do they say to that?
He came back with, well, there's no such plan, the CEO just does kind of what he wants basically. And I'm like, well, there has to be a strategic plan with a company of your size because a $90 million company. So
But,
they have.
I mean, that sounds like an upsell opportunity for you, right? On time to do the strategic plan, though. If the CEO of a $90 million company enjoys making it up, as they're going along, that there's some other challenges there as well. So with this situation, it sounds like company A, if you were to work with company B, would basically, and they're like, company A would be like, we're not going to work with you anymore. It sounds like company B doesn't care because they wanted to talk to the complementary company and all that. So it sounds like in this particular case, if we're looking at client exclusivity in general, and this particular situation specifically, it sounds like ultimately company A is threatening to walk away. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
So maybe a framework to look at this, and for everyone who's listening, if you're in a similar situation where you're trying to make a decision where maybe there's not a win-win, maybe it's, if not win-lose, and at least it's not a perfect outcome for everything. The question to consider would be this, and Michelle, let's dig into this specifically. What is your ideal outcome here, and what is your minimum acceptable outcome? Because that is going to drive my advice on next steps. So what is your ideal, and what is your minimum acceptable?
Well, my ideal would be both clients, because
Got it.
client A is a good client, and I've been I guess one of my weaknesses, I'm too nice and I'm too giving, and so
You're not the only one. I hear that often. Blah blah blah. This employee is doing that. It's like, well, you could have fired them 2 years ago, as I suggested.
Yeah. So I've been flexible on the agreement, and so I shouldn't do that moving forward. That's not happening. And client B, we haven't heard from them yet on a final decision, so we don't totally know. So we're kind of in limbo right now.
Do you have a proposal out to client B at this point? Okay, so they know the options. What did you tell company B about their request to talk to company A?
We told them that it might not be a good time right now because they're very sensitive to us working with other people in that industry.
They're being a little paranoid, I guess. Okay.
Yes, they kind of want us all to themselves, basically. And so they are like, oh, okay, that's different, but yeah. And so, but the marketing director or CMO at client B, he's like, the owner is going to want to reach out to them. So what should I say?
And of course, they could have reached out anyway without asking you. Assuming the other client is on your website or what have you, it's not a secret. Right. I mean, they could have done a back channel anyway. So,
Yeah. And so he's been really good about it. And he's like, I'm just going to tell him, don't reach out. We'll wait till the dust settles, type of thing. But the other kind of pain is that their agreement renewal is the end of this month. And so we're trying to put together a new agreement for them. And this marketing director is she's very emotional, and she's just upset that we're working with this client, and she keeps saying, well, what are they saying? Aren't they upset? And I have Brittany here. Hey. Who is the account manager and my partner in crime. And so she's the one that's been dealing with the contact, and then basically saying, well, Michelle's the one in charge, so you have to talk with her. And
which is a great way, by the way, to build in some extra company. Say, oh, I'd love to. That's part of the role of whenever anyone's wearing an account manager hat, whether that's your official title or not. It's, oh, I'd love to do that. Blah blah blah. Let me talk to the project manager to see if it's in the budget, or let me talk to the there's always someone you can go to. Of course, when you're the owner, that's a challenge. Though actually, as the owner of my business, I can say I need to talk to my project manager on that. right? It's like I'm an expert on the strategy advice, but I'm not an expert on, or I mean, I've been a project manager, but in the work now, I have other people helping. So like someone asked, could we accelerate this? It's like, I need to talk to Kat about that, or I need to talk to Diane about that. It sounds interesting, but from an account management perspective, anything you'd add about this scenario, which sounds really frustrating and annoying, and
Yeah.
so I'm working on a robot client project. It'll be a few years away. So in the meantime, anything you'd add AM wise?
Well, so one thing that she thinks is a resolution is if we ask her if we can talk to somebody.
Talk to somebody. What do you mean?
Like if we have a prospect that we want to go after, she wants us to ask permission if we can actually present to them.
Oh, before you even have contact with the prospect?
Yeah.
Well,
And we're obviously like, hell no, but
right. I would agree. Well, I think maybe the next step here, and it is worth considering, there may be a dollar value where client budget wise, it makes sense to consider putting up with, the ridiculousness here. But it sounds like they're not there. And this is why it's important to avoid client concentration problems, where any one client is more than 20% of the business, this and that. So, you can say no. I fired a client last year after having some concerns about, some of their business ethics, and, they were well below 20% of the revenue. So I could do it. A follow-up question, Michelle. It sounds like the ideal is that you keep both. What is the minimum acceptable from your perspective?
The minimum is that I need to keep one of them.
Keep one of them. Got it.
And they're basically both at the same value.
Yes.
Their monthly agreement is pretty much exactly the same. So my concern is with the new client is we don't know what we're getting.
Right.
The current client, we know all of the issues and what she likes, what she doesn't like, how she works, all of that. But this new client, we think is going to be really great and very cool. But we have been in situations previous where we took on this really large client and then they want to cancel at 3 months because they didn't get leads, and it's just like, we told you from the beginning, you're not going to get leads in like 1 month.
Right.
So we always make it very clear, but then once you're in the agreement, then they seem to forget these things. But
you did mention that company B seems to be a better culture fit. I mean, it sounds like company A is led by a control freak, or no, the marketing head is a control freak. The CEO is some sort of bombastic person, but isn't a great, kind of like, oh, whatever I want to do, and so the odds are the marketing person is getting pulled in all these different directions. And I don't know. We're getting into the psychology of the clients. It's a little bit. This is several stages removed. But I think ultimately it's time to have a conversation. As we have another Michelle in chat mentioned, can you just have a frank discussion where you listen to, this is about company A, their worries, concerns, pains, and what would happen if you worked with both? After listening and mirroring the concerns, show that they are in fact complementary and could help expand for both. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yes, we have had that.
You've had that, and how did that go?
Yeah.
And what was the outcome of that?
Round and round and round and round. Like, she doesn't see my perspective. I don't see her perspective. It's just, and well, I need to take a look at things. And then we, looked at this past year and like all the work we've been doing and how are we going to bill for this next year because the agreement's coming up. And basically she's saying, well, if you're going to work with that client, then I guess, I don't know, Craig's not going to go for that. She keeps blaming it then on Craig, who's the CEO. He's not going to go for that. And I said, well, let me talk to him because, and I tried that before. And she's like, I'm the one that manages this account because I copied both of them. And she's like, I'm the one that manages the account. I'm the one that you need to talk to. I'm like, okay.
All right. So yeah, that just reinforces that she's a control freak.
Yeah, exactly.
So if this were a situation where you could talk to the CEO, you might figure out what's going on. It sounds like she is intentionally using her role to exert power over the relationship. I mean, you may not even, what she is delivering may not even be what the CEO wants. If the CEO is the kind of person who's running around everywhere, probably the CEO would be like, oh, there's an opportunity to grow by building a new partnership with a complementary business? Sure, sounds good. You know, and of course these aren't conflicts, like, you know, kind of thing. So the fact that she's basically blocking you, that's an issue. Now, I would say we're going to shift over to our fourth question today in a moment, but here's a tool to consider, which is my reason, options, choose negotiation framework. The idea is that you cite a reason, you know, so in this case, it might be, we'd love to continue working with you, but, you know, there is not exclusivity in the arrangement. And also, you're not direct competitors. You know, in practice, if another rack system company came to us, we would probably decline. But again, you're not competitors from our perspective. Then you give them 2 or 3 options. You could say, you could increase your spend by 3x, and then we would give you exclusivity within rack systems or something like that. Or you could say, you know, if you keep it your current budget, then we can't provide that. And you decide, client, company A, if you want to continue, here's the deadline. There might be a third option in the middle or at the moment where you mentioned their agreement is about to end. You might want to give them a 1-month extension or a couple months to give you some additional time so that they have a bit of time to decide and you have some time. But indeed, as Sean mentioned in chat, you know, they're ultimately being a bully here. So I try reason, options, choose. You need to decide what are the right lineup of options. Though one other question, before I want to check in on like, what are you thinking about your next steps would be, have you ever previously had a relationship with the CEO?
No, I've never even met him.
Okay.
Brittany has met him, so she knows more of what he's like.
Yeah, he's kind of crazy.
Okay.
Where he's just like one of those like ADHD, like running like crazy and all these thoughts all the time, and it's kind of his way or the highway. So he is like a difficult person in that way, but I feel like I can get through to him because one, he reminds me a lot of my dad, so I know how he needs to be talked to.
Yeah.
But like, you know, every time I've been around him, like at the end of the meeting, he gives me a hug. So like he obviously likes me and likes what we're doing and everything, but it's almost like she's being a gatekeeper.
Yeah.
Like if we were able to talk to him, he would see reason and we could get through, but she's, you know, blocking it. And I think her whole thing is, I don't know how you're gonna talk to Craig about this. Craig's not gonna like that. Craig's very competitive and blah blah blah. It like we keep coming back with responses to her issues and solutions, and she just like doesn't care. It's like she just doesn't even listen and just comes up with more excuses.
It sounds like
our email thread, and so that you can see like the discussion and like I went back, so I talked with a lawyer and I'm like, I don't know, like, what do I do? And so they gave me their recommendation, and which was not do exclusivity because this particular industry is growing significantly fast.
Rapidly growing.
And so I came back to her and said, okay, here's what we'll do, because they actually have 5 companies under them.
Okay.
But the majority of the market is for the one company.
Got it.
Said, here is 6 to 8 direct competitors.
Yeah.
If you don't want us to work with these companies, then fine. But I'm not going to exclude indirect clients.
So you've already given her at least one option. You've said, we'll agree to not work with, it's like direct, they have direct competitor exclusivity. I think one of the challenges here is ultimately, and there's some conversation about this on chat, like she seems to be afraid of the CEO. You could, in theory, go in and say, like Brittany, you could be like, hey, you know what? I'll talk to him. Like, I know you're concerned about him. I mean, part of it is like the marketing person, like if she makes the CEO unhappy, she's going to lose her job. If you make the CEO unhappy, maybe you lose the account, but that doesn't directly impact you, or at least not in the sense of like, your whole salary. So in an ideal world, you'd find some opportunities, as the other Michelle in chat noted, positioning the marketing person as, the rock star to look great to the CEO. They may be a little far beyond that. And as Eric mentioned in chat, even if you get through the CEO, the marketing person could still make the ongoing relationship a further nightmare. So my recommendation, as then we're going to shift over to Brad's question, would be, as you think about your ideal outcome and your minimum acceptable, how can you frame options that would produce that? The fact that you're willing to lose one of them gives you more options than if it was like, well, we can't, we got to get both. That's the only acceptable option. So does that, I know that's not a perfect solution to everything, but does that help from a direction standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if we could just talk with the CEO, and because she's thinking so emotional about it, she's not thinking factual about it, that
she's not in the robot client program.
Yeah, she's just blocking it, and just because if she feels this passionate, like, she's going to go tell the CEO, yeah, and I can't believe they're doing this, so it's not like she's going to be, hey, let's keep working with them because of,
well,
this.
To her, it will hurt their company because the lighting might go in their competitors' reps. So to her, it would hurt her company if we post on Instagram, which in their niche is like huge, and somebody asks, whose recs are those? And we have to say, oh, it's this person. But
I think at this point, I think you're thinking about the right things. This is heading toward an ultimatum with them. I think the one thing to weigh, and then we'll need to switch over to Brad. The one thing to weigh is, are you willing to basically cut her out, go directly to the CEO and say, your marketing person is incompetent. You should probably fire her. Or like, how far do you want to go on that? Because that does seem accurate. If he thinks that she's great and she's not, and is ultimately hurting the business, would he want to know? I don't know. You know the relationship better than I do, but if you continue working with her, it's not going to go smoothly. So you have to decide where you want to go. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Well, good luck with that. I'm seeing some great comments in chat from fellow agency leaders. So thank you everyone who's contributing. Well, the final Q&A slot today coming up is with Brad. Brad, do you have, let's see, are you unmuted and such? Awesome. There we go. Let me go ahead and add in there. Well, Brad, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
Well, Brad, to paraphrase, you asked a question related to business development, but specifically about how to structure things. You asked, to paraphrase, how big should an agency's sales team be, and what roles should we have? Could you elaborate a bit on where things are now?
Yeah, so we're a company, Blue Toe Media in Wilmington, North Carolina. We've been around for over 15 years now, and we've always had one account executive, one account manager, maybe two account managers. And then with everything that happened last year, we really looked to focus on the client experience and kind of see what we could do to improve. So we shifted a lot of roles. I shifted from marketing director to director of customer experience. And I kind of manage the A accounts right now. And we brought in, we upgraded our account manager, and we added 2 account executives to try to see what else is out there.
Got it.
They're in different spots of the country to kind of fill around.
Sort of territory kind of thing.
Yeah, and so just looking to see if there's a ratio of the number of sales team we should have compared to our clients and our development team, design team, et cetera. So we've kind of gone all in, essentially, I feel like, for the new year, and just want to make sure, see what your thoughts are, if we're doing things the right way, if there's something to look at that we're not considering.
Got it. Well, glad to help on that. And Kat, if you could pull up the article related to sales budgeting, how much people should budget for sales, like kind of percentages, and share that on chat, that would be helpful. So Brad, to your question, there are a few ways to look at this. In the article that Kat shared about when to hire a salesperson, one of the things we look at in that article is the idea of unbundling the sales role. So one approach to sales is to work with a full stack salesperson. That is, they do everything. They are doing prospecting all the way down to, prospecting, qualifying, negotiation, proposal, close the deal, hand them over to the delivery team. Like, they're doing everything from start to finish. And that can be an option. And indeed, when agencies start and one of the owners is doing sales, they are doing everything themselves, full stack, kind of like the idea of a full stack developer, doing both front end and back end. In sales, I've identified a certain set of sort of stages if you were to unbundle it. And so as I walk through these stages, and there's more on this in the article about around 16 warning signs around hiring a salesperson, Brad, you can think about which are some things that you might want to split off to someone else. So maybe the account executives are handling certain aspects, but someone else is handling another aspect. So here, let me run through the stages, but does that general idea make sense?
Yeah, definitely. That's something we've had someone do the prospecting for leads in the past, and we have one new account executive who's able to do that on his own. So he wants to do the prospecting. So there's
perfect. So
both right ways for sure.
So it sounds like ultimately, you're sort of starting on that. Well, here are the components to consider. And for everyone who's listening, regardless of whether you have a team of multiple salespeople or otherwise, you can decide what's right for you. And I'm sharing, if you're listening live on chat, this is my article on cost of sales. It looks at sales as a percentage of your team and or a percentage of the business in terms of how much you're spending on sales. But here are the components from a bundling or unbundling perspective. So you've got prospecting, that is finding opportunities in the first place. That's sort of a cold outreach kind of approach. You also have, then you have qualifying, right? So someone's raised their hand to say they'd like help. That doesn't mean they necessarily are actually qualified for help. Going back to Beth's earlier comment about the really small nonprofits. I worked with nonprofits. One example was $60 million annual budget. I met a nonprofit at a conference who was like, I need a website. And I looked at their website. I'm like, yeah, they need a new website. But then I looked up their 990, and the executive director's annual salary, instead of being 100,000 plus, her annual salary was $20,000 a year. No way they're going to afford our pricing. So the qualifying, you need to decide what are the right set of criteria, but qualifying. Then you have consulting. Now, if you're doing productized services, there may not be a full consulting component, but in consultative sales, you're trying to sort out what is their problem, are we matched to solve that problem, kind of thing. So that tends to be someone who knows enough about the work to ask the right questions. So we've got, prospecting, qualifying, consulting, then scoping. How are you actually going to solve their problem? If it seems like a fit for what you can do, how would you structure it? How much would it cost? That could be hourly, it could be milestone, it could be value-based, but like, what does the scoping look like? Sometimes you'll get help from a sales engineer. That could be, someone who's a subject matter expert in the particular area, helping another helping the salesperson figure that out. So you've got scoping, proposing. How do you turn, all of the details into a client-facing proposal? Closing the deal, which probably involves some negotiation. Maybe they're like, we like, option B, this from option B and this from option C. Can we mix and match? And you have to decide, do you want to Frankenstein the options or not? After, so you've got proposing, closing, then you've also got onboarding, which is that transition point between business development and the delivery team. The salesperson ideally is going to be there, but the account manager is ideally leading that. Finally, you've got supporting, so if something goes wrong with a new engagement, you ideally have the salesperson go back to help save the day if things have gone poorly. Hopefully not, but you want them to be checking in. And then finally managing the relationship or managing the sales process. That's someone, doing like a sales management meeting. How is your pipeline going? You mentioned you were running into a problem with this opportunity last week. Where are things now? Or, pointing out, you've mentioned that they've pushed it off before and they pushed it off again. They pushed it off a few months ago. They don't sound fully qualified, so like having someone to sort of talk through where things are going. So with those points in mind, do you see some clear things you could split out? It sounds like you have some people who are doing prospecting, you've had people support. Kind of what's your reaction to the idea, and the article lists the specifics. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I think we're doing some of it, but we need to really look at all the roles and make sure everything's covered and see who can kind of do some and see. We might not have a hat for someone for every particular role, but some people can certainly wear.
And that's totally fine. The person who does the prospecting might also do the qualifying, right? Because they're sort of in that early stage. Maybe they turn it over, if you have like a business development representative, a BDR, maybe you turn it over to a more experienced person to do the consulting. And maybe, so maybe you have kind of the early stage business development representative, then you have a more experienced person who's doing the consultative stuff. Maybe your consultative person is good at like defining the requirements, but then they pull in someone else, maybe a subject matter expert, once it's clear the client is qualified or the prospect is qualified, to help on the scoping kind of thing. And onboarding, perhaps turn it over to the account manager to lead that. I'm sharing on screen sharing. This is the article related to how much your agency spend on selling. And this helps as you think about structure. I would say between 5 and 20% of your revenue going toward selling. And that includes sales related compensation, as well as, to an extent, what you're spending to make it happen, subscriptions to, lead gen services, or to, Crystal Knows. By the way, if you don't use Crystal Knows yet, you can, basically it's an overlay to LinkedIn, so that you can see what the behavioral profile of the person probably is, even down to suggestions of, it might be, they're a details person, do this, or they're not a details person, do this instead. Powerful stuff. And 20%, so 5% would be a baseline. That would be if an agency is, smaller agency, part-time sales help, it's not a dedicated salesperson. 20% would be, high growth, where you're intentionally investing a lot towards sales, where the hope is that 20% will drop as revenue goes up. So, we shared that article there, and Kat, thanks for sharing the Crystal Knows example. In terms of how many people, some of that is a philosophical choice. If you're very high growth, you're probably going to have more people, right? You might have several people. One client was like, I like the idea of having several salespeople because then I can like pit them against each other to like see who's going to sell best. There are pros and cons to that approach. Yes, they're going to be competitive, but if, for instance, every salesperson has solely an individual target, you might be, well, don't be surprised when you find that the salespeople are not cooperating with each other, because why would they? Because it is solely individual, and you basically told them that, it's, Lord of the Flies or Hunger Games or something. Ideally, there's some incentives built in so that they cooperate with each other in some way. For instance, in your example about if it's like geographic territories, if someone hears from someone in an alternate territory that's not theirs, you want them to have a reason to pass it over to the other person. So, something to consider. And also keep in mind that the ability to retain a sales team, especially a larger sales team, comes down to, in part, what are the on-track earnings? That is, if they hit 100% of their quota, what are they getting in terms of salary, in terms of commissions, and in terms of bonus? Depending on the agency's revenue and what the sales quotas are, that may drive the number of people. For instance, I worked with an agency 6 years ago where the owner said, hey, we've been having some problems. We once had 100 clients, we're down to 80. I'm like, 80 is still too many. And he's like, we had like 35 people, we're down to like 15 people. We once had 3 questions, we once had 3 salespeople, and 2 of them quit. And my last salesperson just resigned a couple weeks ago, and it turned out the salesperson's last day was the day that I was doing the on-site. So I added an exit interview with the salesperson. And I asked, we were speaking in January of that year. I said, when did you start looking? And he's like, oh, back in October. The owner had no idea that, things were bad. And I was like, oh, how did that come about? And he said, well, I looked at my commission and all for this past year, and that was pretty good. But I saw the agency was struggling, and I was losing the residual side for retention and all. So like last year, I made 110,000. This year, I projected I'm only going to make 80,000. And so you know what? I got a job at the local TV station making way more money. Like the salesperson knew the ship was sinking before the owner did. So I'd say, don't have so many salespeople that they're not going to make on-track earnings that they like. Does that make sense? And I see there's a question, Beth had asked, what should the percentage be? If it's like 5% minimum, 20% if you're high growth, some of that's going to depend on your revenue, but say if you target 10%, that's probably a good benchmark. So Brad, what questions do you have from what we covered? I know we've covered a range of things. How can I help?
I think you covered a lot. I think I need to look at the different roles, make sure we're covering all of those and what we can do to improve any of those, and just kind of see. I feel like most of our sales happen reactively, where someone's contacting us or it's an existing client. So it's kind of trying to put a lot of attention to the proactive, the new sales that are happening, and seeing if we can get those numbers up more than anything else.
Yes. And if you're in a circumstance where you're getting a lot of inbound opportunities, prospecting may not be as important, kind of thing, rather than, if you don't have any opportunities, then someone needs to be out there, finding that. So, looking forward to hearing how things go as you work through that. Yeah. It sounds like you're thinking about the right things, and I think those articles, when we discuss, should help you take it up to the next level.
Sure.
Cool. Well, Brad, thank you so much for joining.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Well, as we wrap up today, Kat has shared some additional links with additional resources. And if you have a question for the future that you want to ask, go ahead and sign up for office hours. It's the second Tuesday of every month in this time slot if you're listening live. If you have a question, include that when you sign up. It's free, there's no obligation, and we'll let you know ahead of time if we pick your question for the the Q&A. So thank you so much for joining. Glad you're here, and certainly good luck as you grow your agency.